First, some news from the world over. President Trump, fresh on the heels of his acquittal in the U.S. Senate from impeachment and his State of the Union address, spoke at the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington on Thursday. Though he never mentioned impeachment at the State of the Union earlier in the week, this time he didn't hold back.
When they impeach you for nothing, then you're supposed to like them. It's not easy, folks. I do my best.
More on that dust-up in a moment with Bill McGurn. And in the wake of the controversy over Pope Benedict and Cardinal Robert Sarah's recent book on priestly celibacy, a key prelate is playing less of a role at the Vatican. Archbishop Georg Gonswein, head of the papal household and private secretary to both popes, appears to be on an indefinite leave of absence. The Vatican press office confirmed on Wednesday that Gonswein's duties are being redistributed after questions arose about his part in facilitating Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI's participation in Sarah's defense of celibacy. Archbishop Gonswein has not been seen at a weekly papal audience since January 15th, and he's missed a number of diplomatic events with Pope Francis at the Papal Palace. We'll have more on this next week with the Papal Posse. Joining me now with his analysis of the president's acquittal, the State of the Union address, and the ever-escalating tensions here in Washington, D.C., is Wall Street Journal columnist Bill McGurn. Bill, thanks for being with us. I want to start, Bill, with something from the president today. This was at what was billed as an acquittal celebration. It turned into much more than that. I was present. Watch.
I've done things wrong in my life, I will admit. Not purposely, but I've done things wrong. But this is what the end result is.
Bill McGurn, he's been holding up those papers at every public event this day. Trump acquittal. First off, how does this affect the presidency going forward? And what do you think has been the political impact on the Democrats who pursued this crusade for the better part of 3 years?
Well, let's take the second part first. We know how it's affected the Democrats. The president's approval ratings have risen the same way Bill Clinton's had risen after he was impeached. Not quite as high as Clinton's, but I think Gallup just put President Trump at the highest ever for his approval ratings of 49%. So we know it didn't work politically. I think the Democrats thought if you impeach him, the support will come, and it didn't come. Do you think this will have a long-term impact come 2020? I saw some initial focus groups and interviews with independents where they were very swayed coming out of this whole impeachment drama and watching that State of the Union address the other night, and they're moving toward the president as well. Well, I don't think they were ever moving away from the president, and that was, I think, Mrs. Pelosi's problem. Look, she led a very partisan impeachment. The founders weren't indifferent to partisanship. That didn't bother them too much, but they had built-in safeguards. And I think what it showed is if you broke down the polls by Republican, Democrat, or Independent, something like 90% of Republicans did not want the president impeached, and something like 90% of Democrats did want him impeached. But what's interesting is that the independents, and especially those in the battleground states, impeachment wasn't working for them. For a lot of them, it's just another Washington drama, a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing, and they just wanted people to get out of it, which I think helps explain why senators such as Susan Collins voted the way she did. I don't think she was under any pressure to move to convict the president.
On Tuesday, President Trump gave his State of the Union address. He didn't mention impeachment there. But at the conclusion of that State of the Union, Speaker Pelosi engaged in this very dramatic coda where she ripped the State of the Union address. She did it 3 times to make sure she was seen. Was this a misfire, an overplay, if you will, of theatrics and gestures here on the part of the speaker?
Look, absolutely. Well, for one, it confirmed. First of all, just by being there in the chamber, knowing that the acquittal was to happen the next day, President Trump looked strong, and it just underscored their weakness. That's the problem with launching an impeachment effort, and you don't know where it's going to go. They ended up Donald Trump at the State of the Union
looked like Godzilla or something. You know, they threw their spears at him and they shot him with bazookas, brought out the tanks, and nothing dented. So and the State of the Union in general benefits the president. It's the most dramatic stage for American democracy. All three branches of government are represented. So I think Mrs. Pelosi just made herself look very small, and the facial gestures and so forth. Yeah. Now they say President Trump snubbed her by not shaking her hand, but then she also snubbed him by not adding a line about it is my high honor and privilege to introduce the President of the United States. I mean, I don't think when you're the minority party, when you want the White House, that's the way to get the White House back.
Yeah, well, I think it was revealing, and coming from a long line of strong Italian women, Bill, this is what happens when you cross an Italian woman. Look out! And when I saw her start ripping those documents, I thought, oh boy. But I think the voter sees a vindictive
If my daughter
spirit.
did that,
Go ahead.
if my daughter did that at a high school graduation, I would be livid.
Oh, me too.
And also, look, it's a rule. It's a good metaphor because that's the rule all parties should have. You know, some of the Republicans had this under Barack Obama. You have to go to it. It would be as if I invited you to my daughter's high school graduation. You don't really know her. You know me. You have to sit through it. You don't know any of the other kids. So your job is to sit there and smile a little and just clap wanly for it, and no one will notice. But when you make scowls and faces and so forth, you just draw attention to yourself in a very unflattering way. And by the way, that's the speechwriter's goal, to either get the other side to cheer for your proposals, to phrase them in a way that makes it hard for them not to stand up and cheer, or to make them look bad for not doing it. And I think the president's team did a great job.
Yeah, well, short of a cattle prod, I think it would have been very difficult to get some of these people to stand up and move at all at parts of this speech. But
But you know what? If they did, it would mean nothing. They just move on by not doing it. You know, no one likes the sullen look when you just announce, record low unemployment. It doesn't work for anyone.
No,
it's part of politics.
Or sending poor children in Philadelphia to school on a scholarship of going to a school of their choice. Sitting there and scowling at that is probably not a good look. I want to show you this. This is Speaker Nancy Pelosi. This is her weekly press briefing. She addressed the president's acquittal.
He's impeached forever, no matter what he says or whatever headlines he wants to carry around. You're impeached forever. You're never getting rid of that scar.
Your reaction, Bill McGurn?
Well, that's true in a sense. I mean, that's one of the unfortunate aspects of weaponizing impeachment, that the president will be in a very small group of presidents who was impeached. On the other hand, he may make history as the only president who was impeached and then went on to be reelected because he's the only one running. And I mean, people talk about weaponizing impeachment. My newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, has rightly complained about how the Democrats have lowered the bar. What I worry is they've done it. It's even worse than that, because there is no way that a Democratic president would have endured the fury that came not only from the opposition party, but the press. I mean, a lot of people in the press egged the Democrats on to do this and so forth. We had chiefs of the intelligence service telling us Donald Trump was a Russian agent. That kind of constellation of forces is never going to be there against a Democratic president. So it's really only for use against Republicans in that sense.
Earlier in the morning at the National Press Breakfast, National Prayer Breakfast, not Press Breakfast, they don't have one of those, but at the National Prayer Breakfast, President Trump took a stab at Mitt Romney, who voted to impeach him, and Speaker Pelosi, who, by the way, was in attendance on the same dais. Watch this.
I don't like people who use their faith as justification for doing what they know is wrong. Nor do I like people who say, I pray for you, when they know that that's not so. So many people have been hurt, and we can't let that go on.
Bill McGurn, your reaction to this. Nancy Pelosi has often cloaked this impeachment drama in a solemn occasion, a prayerful occasion. She says she prays for the president. Your reaction to that kind of calling her out at a prayer breakfast?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the venue. I would have preferred, I think the president should have opened the prayer breakfast by saying, I first want to say I know Mrs. Pelosi has been praying for me throughout this impeachment trial, and I want to thank her because clearly those prayers have been answered. I think that might have been a better way to dispatch it. So, look, people use their religious convictions to vote and justify all sorts of things. I don't see why that's any less legitimate. What he's claiming is that it's phony, and people are free to draw that conclusion. But again, that's not really for us to know, right?
Yeah, well, I also think it's rather convenient to invoke faith when it doesn't cost you anything. But on these big issues, religious liberty, Christian persecution abroad, the right to life, then suddenly faith vanishes. We don't want to hear from people of faith. We don't want to talk about faith. So it's a very interesting.
Then it's the shouts of wall of separation.
Right. Church and state. Remember that letter from Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist. During his speech at the White House on Thursday, after the acquittal, President Trump had this to say about what the Democrats might be planning next.
I'm sure that Pelosi and Crying Chuck, they'll do whatever they can, because instead of wanting to heal our country and fix our country, all they want to do, in my opinion, it's almost like they want to destroy our country. We can't let it happen.
Bill McGurn, there are voices from Capitol Hill saying they're going to subpoena John Bolton. The investigations will continue. The president in that talk even said they may even use the New York State to try to get at me in a different way. Your thoughts on this? Will this end, or are we just going to have endless investigations and impeachment hearings until the next election?
I don't think it will, Ed. Look, the pattern has been, first it was James Comey. There were FISA warrants on people affiliated with the Trump campaign. Then it was Bob Mueller, and that faded. And then it became impeachment. They're just not going to give up on this. I'm not sure it helps them. Let's say also the Republicans are doing some of the same. I mean, I believe there's a Senate investigation now into Hunter Biden. So I think it's going to be a lot of noise, but largely in the background. I think people may be tired of it. Again, I think the surveys of voters in the battleground states, particularly the independents, show they don't really have an appetite for this. They want people to move on and get the business done for the American people.
Yeah, no, it's a moment for unity, and I think this kind of toxic attack and viciousness, I don't think it's what the people want. And the Gallup poll would seem to indicate Trump's at a 49% approval rating. That's the highest since he took office. And Republicans are at a 94% approval rating, which is pretty astounding considering it's the Republican Party. Now, I want to show you this. All through these impeachment hearings, Trump has been rallying those supporters that he has and recalling his record. He signed that big trade pact with Canada and Mexico that people said he couldn't get done. The China trade deal is moving forward. And then at the National Prayer Breakfast, he said this about religious liberty.
To protect faith communities, I have taken historic action to defend religious liberty, including the constitutional right to pray in public schools. We are upholding the sanctity of life. And we're pursuing medical breakthroughs to save premature babies because every child is a sacred gift from God.
How important are these issues, Bill McGurn? And have you ever seen a president so vocal about this right to life?
No, I think there have been, most of the previous Republican presidents have been pro-life and have made their own contributions and so forth. Look, I wrote some of George W. Bush's speeches on it, and he had some very good language. But I think President Trump, it's good to not just be for them. The difference is, I think, his supporters, especially the supporters who are fighting for life, they feel the president's really with them. Look, he was the first president to actually go to the rally and speak to people there, not keep them at arm's length like, phoning it in from Camp David. So I think it's a big thing. You mentioned the popularity. I think going forward that I can understand Donald Trump wants to get it off his chest what he really thinks of these guys now that he's free. But I think that his fortune lies in being more the Donald Trump of the State of the Union. We've done these great things, but greater things are to come, and to rally people and really be presidential. I mean, the thing about the State of the Union is, even though the Democrats didn't applaud, you're reaching beyond them to all the American people and inviting them on the journey. And I thought it was very impressive. And I think that if he sticks to that, he has a very good message going in.
Now, Bill, you were the head of the speech writing for George W. Bush. Your reaction to the staging of this State of the Union, it really was a produced event. You had these rip your heartstring moments, the Tuskegee Airman and his great-grandson, the little girl who got the Opportunity Scholarship. You had families reunited, the Rush Limbaugh Medal of Freedom. Your thoughts on the staging of that? Some say this is just a reality television star turning the State of the Union into that. Your thoughts?
Well, you know what? People say that, like, for the family that was reunited with their the dad from Afghanistan, the start. But it's not a joke. It's not Oprah-esque for those people. For those people, it's really real. Look, I watch. There's a whole show, TV show about the homecomings.
Right.
I watch it. I love seeing these families, and it's a reminder to everyone else how grateful we are for these people who serve and for the families and what they sacrifice back here. So I thought the staging was great. Look, the goal of a State of the Union, when you're writing it, as I say, is to get the other side to cheer your things, to put faces on policies and decisions, and that's why you have those people, and to make it very difficult for the other side to not applaud or boo
resist
what they're doing. And I thought Donald Trump really did a great job. I mean, one of the underrated things about President Trump are his set speeches. I think his team has done, not just here, but at the UN. I think of the State of the Union 2 years ago. It was a great theme last night.
I thought it was beautifully executed. And those moments, it did remind you the cost of the deployments and the thousands of men and women, mothers and fathers who are fighting on our behalf and separated from those families. It drives that reality home. And I thought I was very moved by it. And not only that, there were moments, and usually State of the Unions, I mean, Bill, your eyes glaze over after about 40 minutes. This was very different. Speaking of voters and reaction, the DNC chair, Tom Perez, is calling for an immediate recanvassing of Iowa. The announcement came shortly before Bernie Sanders claimed victory Thursday in a race that officially remains too close to call. Your thoughts on the way this Iowa canvassing was handled on the Democratic side, and what does this tell us about the competency of the party itself going into 2020?
Well, I don't know what larger lessons we could draw. Clearly, the folks in Iowa, the Democratic Party, just blew it. And it's not just the app. It seems to me that the bigger failure, I mean, you should be prepared for an app to go down or something. People have been calling in for years the results, for decades. They obviously didn't have enough phone banks or ways for people to call in their numbers. So I think it's really bad. It is a disservice to the candidates, because if you're a candidate that has calculated, I'm going to put everything in Iowa because it's so important here, and then you're deprived of the victory, even though you might be named the victor later. Part of this is people wait up all night. You've got your volunteers who have been out there drinking cold coffee and eating stale pizza, and you rally them by saying, your work paid off. So I do think that the candidates have a legitimate complaint. I don't think the results, I think if they recount, I'm not sure the results are going to be much different.
Yeah,
than,
I'm not wild about it.
now.
I've never been wild about the Iowa caucus. I've been there several times.
I like the Iowa caucus.
You do? Why? I think it's musical chairs with a side of bullying. I'm not crazy about it.
I'm not, because what I hate in the United States in politics is that everything goes toward dull conformity, right? The primary system. The caucuses, it's not, I'm not sure I would want to do it. You have to commit several hours to doing it. But if the people of Iowa like that, it has some points. People go, someone makes a speech to try to draw. you know, to do it, we're going to do it all the same and then pretend we're not going to have any problems with the regular elections or regular primaries. I'm not sure. So my point is, I'm not sure it's the caucus system. There are only a few left. And remember, the caucuses gave Barack Obama a way into the presidency over Hillary Clinton. I'm not sure we should be cutting off avenues to the presidency. In the same way, if Michael Bloomberg can get people to pay attention to his message by spending money on ads, I'm for that too.
Okay, Bill McGurn, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for the time. You can follow Bill McGurn's commentary at the Wall Street Journal at WSJ.com. Bill, thanks again.
Thank you.